Good evening, members. I'm trying to make sure, can everybody hear me? Just about. I can't get much closer to the microphone. Whoops, okay. Right, anyway, members and members of the public and who are watching here and online, and also the press, if they're here, thank you for attending this full council meeting, 7th of November 2023. I'm Councillor Leslie Dedman, and as Chairman of BCP Council, I shall be chairing the meeting and supported by Vice Chairman Simon Ball. There are housekeeping arrangements for this meeting, and of course, please note that the meeting is being recorded by the Council for live and subsequent broadcast. It will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. Right, so notes about managing the meeting. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand clearly, not just a little wave, but a big wave, so that I can see you. If there's consensus in the meeting for a motion, I will ask if there is any dissension, and then if a formal vote is required, this will be by a show of hands. If anybody requests a recorded vote, we have to have the support of a quarter of the members of the meeting for that. Please could members indicate to me if they are leaving the meeting. And also, I'm going to allow for a comfort break when appropriate. That's usually after 2 hours, if we're still here after 2 hours. And the other thing is, please avoid leaving the meeting during a debate unless it's really, really essential. If we have points of order raised, can you please state the constitutional provision, i.e. the number of the point? And obviously we assume that all the councillors uphold the highest standards of conduct during our meeting, treat each other with courtesy and consideration. And I just want to remind you that this is a meeting held in public, as we always do have, but it's not a public meeting. We have public in attendance, which I'm very glad to see, filling up the balcony. But they are to observe the meetings and not to enter the debate. So can I request that members of the public now remain silent throughout the meeting? Right, so we're going straight through the agenda. We have got one movement, but I'll tell you when I come to it. Right, apologies. Chief Executive, we have apologies. Could you read them out, please?
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies received from Councillor Sue Aikenhead, Councillor Hazel Allen, Councillor Joe Clements, Councillor Eleanor Connolly, Councillor Bobby Dove, Councillor Dwayne Farr, Councillor Anne Filer, Councillor May Haynes, Councillor Karen Rampton, Councillor Lawrence Williams, and Councillor Margaret Phipps, I think, will be here later.
Oh, thank you very much. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Chief Executive, have we had any declarations of interest received?
Thank you, Chairman. None from councillors, but there has been a declaration received from the Interim Monitoring Officer in respect of item 10, for which he will leave the room for that item. But can I just ask if any member is considering making a declaration of interest, please refer to the flowchart set out on the agenda and follow that procedure. Thank you.
Right, we move on to item 3, confirmation of the minutes of our last meeting, which was held on the 12th of September 2023. Have the members all read the minutes, and is there any dissension from confirming the minutes? Is that a yes over there? Sorry, I can't quite see. Yes. Would you like to say your point?
It's on page 11 of the minutes.
Yes.
It's with regards to the motion that Council passed on knife crime. In the first paragraph, that young people can stand up for themselves and harm others. That wasn't the wording. It was not harm others. So it's just... Thank you.
Yeah, we think we missed the word not. Are you saying it off the agenda? Yeah. Yep,
it was not harm others.
I think that's an accurate correction.
Yes.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you,
important.
Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so apart from that, can we agree the minutes? Right, thank you, members. I think we've got consensus on that one. Right, now, given the heightened public interest in the motions before Council tonight, I'm going to propose that the order of business be amended to take item 12, notices of motions, next. I'm going to ask the Vice Chairman, Councillor Bull, to second this.
Happy to second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Council, I have to ask that you approve this reordering by consensus. Is anybody objecting to that? And I'm also going to ask that we reorder one item of agenda item 13, which is the question which is being put by Councillor Salmon. Councillor Salmon, is that your wish? Yeah. Right, thank you. Right. Yeah, I don't know whether Kate. Sorry, you're both... Yes, okay, thank you. Kate Salmon. I'm so sorry. Yes, that will be agreeable to you. Councillors, we need a seconder for that. Councillor Bull.
I am happy to second that.
It's because of personal reasons, Councillor, whoever. Judy. I think, Councillor, it would usually be personal reasons, wouldn't it? Thank you. So, Council, we're just bringing that one item, but we are bringing now the motion from Councillor Salmon. So, the Palestine motion will be taken first, and this is the conflict in Israel and Palestine. Councillor Joe Salmon, can I call upon you to move your motion? And as you know, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, so I'm very happy to move this motion. So do I get my 3 minutes starting now, yeah? Bang, I'll start the clock. Right, so I'd like you all to support this motion, although there are a few things missing from it that I would have liked to include, and I feel obliged to highlight and explain those now. You might notice, first of all, this motion does not condemn the horrific attacks on the 7th of October. That's something I feel very uncomfortable about personally. I think there's no contradiction in opposing the occupation and the subjugation of Palestine and condemning the horrific attacks we saw on the 7th of October. And I would say, to be morally consistent, you must hold both positions simultaneously. You'll also notice this motion doesn't conclude any condemnation of the genocidal and counterproductive response by the Israeli state, and although it hopes for a ceasefire and hopes for a release of the hostages, it does not call on the government to take any actions towards those ends. Now, I was told those things were, although they were included in the original motion, those were not things we could speak to this evening, which slightly frustrates me. I do think there is a lack of leadership on this issue from our political class. And there are two common traps I think people fall into when they encounter horror like we're seeing today in Gaza, that started on that horrific day on the 7th of October. The first thing people will do is they will witness that horror and they will feel a terrible sense of powerlessness, but that will fade over time. And they will begin to accept those horrible things as just one of the grim realities of the world, like a natural disaster almost. Or alternately, they will decide or continue to believe that one side is the side of truth and justice, and the other side, no matter what their position, is simply evil. And from that point on, all atrocities that are carried out, even those that are carried out by the side they believe to be true and just, are actually the fault of the other side they label as evil. Now, those two simplistic understandings of a conflict are one of the things that means those conflicts are sustained and can be exploited by the forces of capitalism and colonialism. Now, make no mistake, I know it's going to make me fairly unpopular and probably unelectable, but I'm not going to make it easy for this council to adopt either one of those simplistic understandings of this conflict. Now, I would ask you to support this motion because it is unashamedly pro-peace. Now, there is a need for us as a council to show leadership here that is not being shown by our national government. We are one of the few countries that does not support a ceasefire in the UN, and that is shameful. Now, this motion only goes a small way to addressing the problems we face, but I would still ask you to support it because it does make that a few small tentative steps. But we must recognise there is much more we need to do to help bring this horrific conflict to an end, and we cannot shy away from discussing the horrors of this terrible war. All right, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kay Salmon, I understand you wish to second the motion, and you also have 3 minutes. Thank you, Councillor. All right, members, are there other members who wish to speak on this motion? And you will all, of course, have 3 minutes. So do I see any hands? Councillor Howell. Is that... No, that's it. Sorry. Councillor Howell, were you first? I think you were. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I had this book, What Did We Do to Deserve This? Palestinian Life Under Occupation in the West Bank, published in 2007, and this has given me some insight. The Israeli-Palestinian situation has been subject to inaccurate reporting and misinformation for many years, so let's get some things straight. 70% of Gaza's population are refugees who have a legal right to return to live on land within Israel. Israel has, though, established Gaza as a prison and treats its population as subhuman. Under international law, Israel is a state, but the Palestinian territories are not. Gaza and the West Bank are illegally occupied by Israel. Palestinians have a right to resist occupation using weapons, but subject to international law. However, the massive asymmetry of military capability and non-statehood of the Palestinian territories mean that it is misleading to refer to acts of resistance and suppression as war. Palestinian resistance groups and the Israeli government have committed acts of terror, assassinations and indiscriminate killing in breach of international law over many years, but the Israeli government's power and influence have enabled to do it on a much greater scale and to engage in collective punishment. While Palestinian representatives, including Hamas, have indicated that they would accept a two-state solution, the Israeli government has never defined its own borders or accepted that the Palestinians have a right to their own state, and some Israeli ministers view all Palestinian territory as part of Israel. The lack of genuine engagement by Israel with a two-state solution and the oppressive nature of Israeli occupation has heightened the sense of despair and desperation amongst Palestinians and empowered Islamic militants. Western politicians still call for a two-state solution, but as most informed people know, unqualified support for Israel from the USA and UK has licensed Israel to steal so much land that a Palestinian state is no longer viable unless Israel withdraws hundreds of thousands of illegal settlers from the West Bank, which is unlikely. Israel has sought to protect its Jewishness by implementing an apartheid system in the West Bank and cutting off Gaza. It can no longer be considered democratic, as it denies Palestinians the right to vote for the politicians who exercise control over them. Netanyahu's government sought to obscure this democratic deficit by bolstering Hamas, which enabled it to claim Israel had no partner for peace. But by doing so, it helped to facilitate the recent slaughter of Israeli citizens. Why should the UK, as a tolerant, liberal, democratic country, support the discriminatory, oppressive and undemocratic state of Israel? If we have learned anything over the last century, it is that the promotion of ethnic, racial or religious division within states facilitates the rise to power of evil people. We need more than a ceasefire. Facts on the ground and the need for a just
nearly
peace.
Finished, Councillor?
I've got one sentence, thanks. Facts on the ground and the need for a just peace should dictate that unless Israel acts to remove settlements, Western governments promote the one-state solution. The development of a successor state to Israel, covering the whole of Palestine, that is committed to peace, harmony, respect and toleration, and gives equal rights to those belonging to any faith or none. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That was a jolly long sentence, but thank you anyway. Councillor Cooper, I know you indicated.
Okay. Well, Mark said quite a lot, so I'll try and... It's put me in a very difficult position, this motion. And if I quote a person I respect a lot, which is Che Guevara, it says, if you tremble with indignation at every justice that you witness, then you're indeed a friend of mine, and every time I watch the television or see the media or try and avoid the social media echo chambers, I tremble with anger and indignation of how in our silence there's a kind of a tacit consent. And I suppose that, recent events in the, the culmination of decades of this conflict, almost everything to do with it, if you ask somebody, you get a different kind of question. Some will begin with the Romans, whose fault is it? Others will talk about the 19th century Jewish migration from the Ottoman Empire to escape the pogroms and the persecutions in Eastern Europe, and the rise of Zionism, or the Balfour Declaration in 1917, or in 1947, the creation of the partition of Palestine. So there's many different reasons of this conflict, a long history, full of anger, full of emotion, full of death, full of hypocrisy, and the fundamental driver of it is capitalism, whether you like it or not. Right now, at this moment in time, as the bombs fall on the non-combatants, the war makers and the money men and women are lining up and counting their pennies. They are not counting the bodies. The last thing that I heard on this conflict is that there are 10 bombs dropped every hour on Gaza, and a child dies every 4 minutes. The Isle of Wight is about the size of Gaza. So imagine there would be no rock off the coast of Southampton, no history, no memories, no cemeteries, no places of interest. That is what is going on. I support this motion and the bravery of it. It's a very brave motion because this conflict it breaks cohesion and it pushes us apart where we need to show solidarity. As a youth worker, I've spent my whole life trying to protect the lives of children, young people and their families, so I will not stand by and be silent while this happens. I support a motion, and I'll quote John MacDonald, which is not very popular, talking about the position of the Labour Party, which has conflicted me.
Just gone over your time, so quick quote, please.
I will quick. Political mistakes and poor judgment in opposition can cause political problems, but in government they can have disastrous consequences. So it's best to adjust the moral and political tiller now. And I speak to my Labour Party colleagues on that one. Thank you for the motion.
So sorry, Councillor Miles. I can just about see you. I need to get my glasses on. So sorry. Yes, do speak.
Thanks for seeing me. And thanks for the last words there, Peter. That's good to hear. I only have a few simple words to continue with. And all I must say is the BCP must not ignore this issue. As local politicians, as close to our ward as we can be, we have to put pressure on the government to act. We must demand a ceasefire. We must not hide behind party whips. Political careers are not more important than to preserve human life. Over 10,000 people have died in Gaza. Over 4,000 of those are children. 4,000 dead kids. We cannot stay silent and allow this number to grow. My own daughter turned 6 today, and she is no more a member of Hamas than the 4,000 children that lie dead already. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Any more hands going up? Councillor Trent, yes.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say that I support the original motion, and I hope that it is dealt with in the form that it's presented, because it's very carefully worded. Because as soon as it starts to take one side or the other, I feel uncomfortable with it, although I do have my own opinions as to what's behind this. And personally, I abhor war. I abhor people who desire war and benefit from war. But I think this motion as it stands is as far as we should go, and I believe that we should support it and then move on to other business.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. I believe I saw Councillor Rice indicating.
Thank you. I heard somebody on the radio say this week, and it... Oh.
Councillor Butt, I think we've had this discussion before that Councillor Rice is exempt from standing up for reasons personal to her. I think that has been mentioned at another meeting. So it will count for all the meetings, Councillor Butt, if that's...
In fairness to Councillor Butt, I don't think you were there when I raised it the last time, but it has been raised recently.
Right, and 3 minutes from now, Councillor Rice.
Thank you. So unfortunately, I can't remember the name of the lady who spoke on the radio this week, but this is the message that she gave that spoke to my heart. The children of Palestine, who will they grow up to be? The children of Israel, who will they grow up to be?
Councillors, any more debate before I ask Councillor Kate Salmon to speak again? Oh, sorry, Councillor, yes, do.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, issues like this are always, I think, very difficult to come before a local council, and I think that whilst we'll all have our own views, I do debate the worth or question the worth of having them here, although it's good to have certain elements voiced. As this motion stands, and I do understand and really appreciate the sentiment behind it and the explanation, and I do thank you for that. And there's lots here that, let's face it, all of us here would support and endorse, in terms of expressing sympathy for those affected, and into the violence and suffering, and everything else that kind of goes into this whole rather grim situation. A conflict with a long history, as I'm sure we're all becoming more and more versed with as time goes on, and some here are particularly well attuned to it already. Of course, this recent escalation is a result of the murder, butchery and violence that was carried out by Islamist terrorists of Hamas. They knew what they were doing. They knew what the Israeli government and armed forces would do. So actually, the only winners here are the Islamist terrorists of Hamas, who do not care for their people, who would rather kill innocent Jewish people than actually protect their own Palestinian people. I have many friends and colleagues who are fearful at the moment. I've had lots of emails. I've had people asking for us not to fly the flag of the UN because of the UN stance on Israel. I know we've all been getting lots of feedback and just information from all and sundry. I obviously would support the council offering. It's heartfelt support in any way possible to local residents. But when it comes to an open door policy for anyone that might be displaced in any way from the conflict that is going on in Gaza, that's a matter for national government. There is no way of vetting those people, and I certainly wouldn't support in any way an open door policy to that effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more hands? So go back to... Oh, so sorry. Councillor Riggs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to be very, very quickly on this, not to talk around the issues, but in April 2022, we passed a motion here in Council on the conflict in Ukraine and the Russian invasion, and it was worded very similarly to this motion which has come before us today, including standing ready to provide support and open our arms to innocent people displaced and affected by these events. We have precedents for offering this in the same way during that motion, which was voted through unanimously by all the councillors who were elected at that time, and to not offer the same for another conflict, I feel would not be putting equal weight to these. So I would support everything which is in this motion and the way that it's written, and say that we have precedence for doing that before. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to... Oh, Councillor Bart.
Thank you. Just one small correction, actually. It wasn't unanimous. I remember that Diana Butler, in fact, either abstained or voted against. So just for the record, it wasn't unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. You've got a fantastic memory. Well done. No, Councillor Rigby, we're not doing back and forth. No, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kate Salmon, I'm going to come to you now to say your piece, and then we're winding up. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have much to add to the debate, but I do just want to there has been it has been raised perhaps a little bit about whether or not we should be debating this motion, whether this is something that we should be concerning ourselves with in this chamber. I would just like to point out that there is a community in BCP that feels very strongly about this issue, and they're outside. And I think that the strength of feeling in our local communities has been very clearly demonstrated, and that therefore we have to show leadership to our own communities about how we treat this appalling state of affairs that we're seeing in the world at the moment. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Joe Salmon, it's your winding up 3 minutes now if you wish to take them.
God, I think I've got to start off by saying sorry. I didn't write much to say at this point, as I thought I'd be having to address maybe some counter-arguments to the points I made initially. So I'm sorry I've done you all a disservice there. I guess all I'd like to say in summing up then is that I'm glad there's nobody who feels they can't support the sentiments in this motion, as I do think it's important that us as prominent figures in our communities, we can sit behind an unashamedly pro-peace point of view that, as Councillor Trent has pointed out, doesn't favour one side or the other, but looks for a long-term peaceful solution. I guess I'd just like to express my thanks to everybody who's attended this evening from the public. I think it's a good thing to see the public engaging with local politics, but it is depressing that it has to come out as expressions of anger and frustration that only occur due to a failure of leadership from our political class and our political institutions. And I think it's a bit of a shame that there was maybe an overreaction to the presence of members of the public who are not typically at council meetings. But I think that's all I've got to say, and I thank you again for supporting this motion.
Right, thank you, Councillor Salmon. Now, members, we've heard the motion, we've heard the debate. I'm going to ask initially, as I'm not sure if there's a consensus. Right, I see heads over there. Right, councillors, we're going to go for a show of hands initially. So that will be all in favour of the motion. Raise your hands. I'm sorry, I should have said that bit.
Raise them very high.
Yes, really, really high, all of you. Thank you. Oops. Thank you, councillors. You can put them down now. Councillors, those against the motion. Are you raising your hand or just waving at me? Okay. Any abstentions? I think it'll pass. I think it'll go through. Okay.
Yes, 21 abstentions, yes, so it's passed.
Right.
44 in favour.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, George, hands down now. Yes, that motion has passed, councillors. Thank you very much for that. Now, as I said, I'm going to now bring forward the motion from Councillor Cooper. The question. Okay, we're going to bring forward the question, I'm so sorry, from Councillor Kate Salmon, which you will see on your sheets, but not at this particular bit. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Chair. Bear with me, I'll just find it. So, yeah, my question is, Given the dire state, it's a question for the leader, given the dire state of local government finances across the country, with ever-increasing numbers of local authorities known to be nearing financial breaking point due to the spiralling costs of delivering their statutory duties with no additional support from central government, a local example within the last 2 weeks being Hampshire County Council, what is the level of engagement between BCP Council and our local MPs in terms of their role of representing the communities they serve at Westminster? Do you think that they're aware that the Council has responsibilities beyond Christmas lights and blue flags? For example, children's services, housing and adult social care.
Right, I'm looking at the Cabinet bench. Who's going to answer? Thank you, Lee.
Thank you. Thank you for raising this important issue. When I became leader, I was quick to engage with all 5 of the Members of Parliament that cover the BCP Council area. I invited them to meet me on a one-to-one basis every 3 to 4 months and also confirmed I would arrange for them to join me, the Chief Executive and any relevant officers for a face-to-face meeting at the Civic Centre each quarter. I can confirm that 4 of them have had their first one-to-one meetings, Sir Christopher Chope, Sir Robert Sims, Sir Conor Burns and Tobias Elwood, and that 2 of them have attended our first group meeting, Sir Christopher Chope and Sir Robert Sims. I also welcomed Tobias Elwood to the BCP Hospitality Marquee at the Air Festival, where he entertained 2 of his diplomatic contacts. In addition, I have had 2 further one-to-one meetings with Sir Conor Burns, and he will be attending the forthcoming Town Centre Summit. He also arranged a meeting, which he also attended, with the Roads Minister, Richard Holden, in Parliament, to discuss our request for freedom to increase fines for illegal parking. For the record, the other Member of Parliament, Michael Tomlinson, has declined all requests to meet. During our meetings, I always ask MPs for the issues that they wish to raise, whether they are matters brought up by individual constituents or issues for the Council. At each of the 4 one-to-ones, future places, cleaning up the Council's reputation, planning improvement and the Council's wider finances have been on the agenda. There have been some very high-profile criticisms of the Council by one particular MP, and I have questioned why they did not raise these issues with me direct during our time together, and suggested in my public responses that they would be better informed if they had attended the most recent meeting, where the main topic of conversation was the financial position of councils, including the Council's potential eligibility for future bids, SEND funding, business rate reform, social care legislation, and matters relating to the local plan, house building and homelessness. Finally, I do also keep the MPs updated when there are incidents that occur in their constituency, and I am aware that they all receive copies of press releases and consultations from the Council.
Leader. Councillor Salmon, do you have a supplementary question?
No.
Okay, thank you. I think we're back on the agenda as was, everybody. So that's good. And thank you very much. That was a very interesting debate earlier and very good answer to questions. Confirmation of minutes we've done. Announcements and introductions from the chairman. Before I make any announcements, I want to come to Councillor Broadhead, who I believe is going to say a few words about former Councillor David Newell. Is that right?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I would like to take a short period of time to pay tribute to former Councillor David Newell, who served on the Borough Pool Council, as well as a very dear friend to many of us in this chamber. David died suddenly and very sadly on the 18th of September at the age of just 63 years old. Colleagues, if you indulge me with a little bit about David. David was born in Lancashire in the spring of 1960 to Olive and Fred, who was an engineer and had a younger brother, Phil, but actually spent most of his life down on the south coast. They regularly holidayed here, and who can resist the amazing area that we live in? So they moved down in 1967, where his father took a job with Hamworthy Engineering. From what I hear, David was very studious at school. He went to Broadstone Infant School and then then Poole Grammar, although his school report said he was often caught staring out of the window and had his head in the clouds, something he puts down to being very bored because he was ever so clever. But anybody that knew David knew that if you could keep him on track for more than 30 seconds, you're a very brave individual. David then went to university. It didn't work out in Manchester, came back to the area and worked actually really interestingly on some of the early liquid crystal displays, but then went back to university and finished with physics and electronics. Spent 10 years in business, travelling the world with his job before carrying on his academic career, taking a master's in Bournemouth University, and never left, and actually stayed and joined the academic team there and was still working as a senior lecturer at the university, and many may have come across him at that time until he sadly passed away last month. He met Jane in 1984, and that's when all the fun started. Jane and Dave were the life of absolutely every party. They were the life and soul of everything they did, travelled the world. Indeed, Jane is currently in a house in Florida where they shared many a time, and were just a fantastic couple, and were married for an astonishing 39 years as well. On his political career, David was very political, but not about party politics, mainly because he was intensely passionate about his community, and first stood as a local councillor in the late 90s, was finally elected to the Borough of Poole in 2003, where he served for 5 years until 2007, really focused on key issues such as children's services and children's issues. He then took a step aside, stood again in 2015, where he served alongside Jane, David in Broadstone and Jane in Merley and Bearwood. And again, I think very much David's legacy would be the education sector. He was very key in lobbying for £100 million of grants to develop Poole schools. He spent all of his time focused on education and became a governor of both Broadstone First School and Poole Grammar for over 20 years. So education went right through him. Chairman, he lived an extraordinary life. We nearly lost him 3 years ago to a brain aneurysm, and David and Jane used that rebirth, that re-opportunity to live life to its very full. I think he did a fantastic job as a councillor. He was the life and soul of every party. He's a very dear friend, and I'm delighted and honoured to pay tribute to him tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. I think we all share in wishing the family the very best. Right. Chairman's announcements. I'm going to just tell you where I've been and when. No, not particularly when, you don't need that bit. Scouts Achievements Awards, Indian Cultural Association event. I also went down to welcome the priest in charge at Poole. That's the Reverend Stuart Coxedge, who probably you will all have met by now. I also went over to West Howe, which is my old stomping ground, for a prize-giving summer reading challenge, and I met other councillors there, which was jolly nice. I also went to Boscombe to the police station opening, which was called the police station opening, as it's never closed except for the public. That's really a bit of a misnomer, but they are opening the police station for the police to use. Arts by the Sea was launched. The Lord Lieutenant had a prize giving. Christchurch launched the Advent calendar. At the Russell Coates Museum, they've got an absolutely fantastic exhibition of very ancient, I think it's 18-something, photographs from Thailand, and that's a really good exhibition. I really recommend that you go along to that. Then on the 26th of last month, we held the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Black History Month event, which was very interesting, very well attended. Then it was the legal service for the High Sheriff, and then, was it only yesterday, Bournemouth University graduation. So you can turn it off now, Graham. I just wanted to see how long that took, basically for Councillor Salmon over there. But, so that's my couple of weeks in a nutshell. And the other announcement I want to make is that in the Mayor's Parlour after this meeting, and I will invite everybody in the balcony as well, we are having, because it's the last meeting before Christmas, so we're having happy Christmas mince pies in the Mayor's Parlour. Excellent. Yes, I know, it's daft, isn't it? If you want to come back in December, that's fine, Marion. But no, perhaps not then. anybody that wishes to come, not only mince pies, I'm sure there's something else, come along to the Mayor's Parlour and we can all get together and wish each other happy Christmases. Righty-ho, that's the announcements out of the way. Oh, I'm so sorry, Vice Chairman has been to... Sorry, Simon.
I'm very pleased to have attended some events on behalf of the Chair. The Hindu Bal Vikas Festival, which was a very lovely evening full of energy and dancing. They even got me up for a moment or two until they realised that I can't dance. The Commodore's reception at the Royal Motor Yacht Club in Poole, and the formal opening and private view of Ian McKeever's Against Architecture exhibition, which was a 25-year exhibition showcase at the gallery at the Arts University, Bournemouth. Thank you.
Sorry, everybody, I'm rustling my papers because I'm looking at the wrong one. We're moving on now to item 5. Thank you. Item 5 on the agenda, which is the public issues. And that is questions, statements and petitions from members of the public, restricted to a total of 15 minutes. Now, where a question to which an answer is to be given is not reached within the time limit, we will provide a written answer. So our first question comes from Daniel Glennon, a public question regarding the advertising of vehicles powered by fossil fuels. Are you hovering on the brink there, Mr. Do come through. Thank you. And I'm going to ask Councillor Hadley to make the response.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So Somerset Council have banned advertising of vehicles powered by petrol, diesel or hybrid power, fossil fuels and airlines, airports and flights on their platforms. So I'm asking, will BCP Council commit to doing the same, please? And also extend this to funders of fossil fuel projects such as JP Morgan. So according to the Financial Times, JP Morgan were the biggest financier of fossil fuels between 2016 and 2021, totaling nearly $400 billion. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Daniel, for bringing this to our attention. The intent behind the Somerset Product Advertising Initiative is certainly in line with our ambitions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to help tackle climate change. The implications of this suggestion will be researched and, if found viable, will be put before Cabinet for a decision. With respect to the activities of local business organisations, the Council will continue to work in partnership with major employers to encourage them to take all appropriate action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from all their activities, including procurement and financing. Indeed, we raised this issue with Barclays Bank following a Council resolution last year, who told us they are committed to aligning their financing portfolios in every sector with the goals and timelines of the Paris Agreement. To achieve our BCP-wide, area-wide targets, we need to work positively and proactively with all our local major organisations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, we'll avoid crashing on the stairs here. But we now have a question from Sue Chapman, who I think I see out there. Sue Chapman, would you like to come through? Thank you, and ask your question. And again, Councillor Hadley will answer.
Thank you. Good evening. An international team of scientists has identified 35 vital planetary signs, of which 20 are being pushed to record extremes. Life on Earth is under siege and there's little progress on humanity combating climate change. That was in the Echo last week, 28th of October. Shockingly, embarrassingly, neither this significant news nor a more inspirational transition town vision appears on BCP's website nor on any government website. Plans are outdated. No speedy decarbonising programme is in place for our well-being and protection as the natural world disintegrates. How will BCP, bearing in mind Councillors' safeguarding brief and adherence to Nolan principles, please address biospherical collapse while informing, incentivising and protecting the public from the dangerous accumulation of greenhouse gases, loss of sea ice and glaciers, rising land and sea temperatures, fossil fuel usage, extreme flooding and species extinction, as well as potential societal breakdown, which is feasible and has been dangerously unexplored?
Thank you. Councillor Hadley is to reply.
Thank you, Sue, for your question. I'm very conscious that the climate change website pages need revision, and I understand a member of our climate team is actively discussing with you the sort of information that would be appropriate for, in your words, informing, incentivising and protecting the public. The entire Council website is currently being reworked, and I'm keen that the content includes helpful and honest challenge and practical advice. Sustainability is at the heart of our new corporate strategy, on which we have recently consulted residents. Our annual climate report is also being prepared, which will inform residents of the progress towards our targets. Significant steps are being taken towards a low-carbon future, which includes the creation of a local area energy plan to inform decisions around low-carbon energy use and generation, an urban forest strategy currently out for consultation, and collaborative work on a local nature recovery plan to protect and increase biodiversity. The evidence of decades of global underdelivery of change is evident in the more extreme weather events that we all see, and BCP Council, businesses and residents need to all play our part in rising to this challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Thank you, Sue. Right, now we're on to item B here. Is Mark Elkins in the chamber at all? Right. We have a statement from Mark Elkins, a public statement regarding crime in Eastcliff and Springbourne Ward. Thank you, Mr. Elkins, if you'd like to come here.
Mark Elkins, Coordinator, Eastcliff and Springbourne Residents Group. Councillors, at a packed meeting of Eastcliff and Springbourne Residents Group 2 weeks ago today, we heard that the authorities did not have the resources to remove street prostitutes and street drug users causing issues. Eastcliff and Springbourne Ward has, along with Boscombe West, the second worst police crime act figures in the BCP Council area. It also has very similar levels of deprivation. Yet despite this, Eastcliff and Springbourne Ward, promised at one time Bournemouth Towns Fund's funding, is in fact, by comparison to Boscombe West, starved of resources to deal with the significant problems it faces. Please remedy this. I'm also here to read out a statement on behalf of Simon Grimstone, West Hill Residents Association. Dear councillors, Eastcliff and Westcliff have similar problems of street sex workers and drug dealing and drugs use. The examples provided to me come from members of the community. This problem has not just appeared. We are particularly concerned by the change to the area relating to licensing and establishment hours. This once peaceful area is blighted by more and more establishment of parties as nightclubs. Westcliff has a conservation area at its centre, and the transformation negatively impacts residents of businesses that live and work here. Councillors, are you use your future decisions to particularly impact on our neighbourhoods? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elkins. And can I just say thank you very much for the questions and the statements. Thank you very much. I do go through. I'd like to remind members and members of the public that the details in these public questions and statements are the personal views of the residents addressing council, to which we really have no right of reply today. But thank you very much for that. And then we go on to C. There have been no petitions received for this meeting. So we move briskly on. Recommendations from Cabinet and committees. Right. We're considering the recommendations on your agendas 6 to 8, which will be taken separately as set out on the agenda. And I'd like to highlight that there are decisions on some of these issues which have been taken by delegated powers by the relevant bodies and are therefore not before the Council. So, item 6 is Cabinet, 25th of October 2023, minute number 48, Christchurch Civic Offices. If Council wish to decide to discuss any detail of the exempt appendix, we will have to exclude the press and public, but I'm not anticipating that happening. Right, I believe that Councillor Mike Cox is going to move this recommendation and Councillor Martin is to second. Councillor Andy Martin, sorry, rather than David Martin. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move this and just to say that the Christchurch Civic Centre is a surplus to requirements. It's our fiduciary duty to sell it, as it's costing this council thousands of pounds literally every week. So I would like the building and the back car park to be sold, and we will of course in that process consult with Christchurch Town Council. You never know, they may want to buy it. I will therefore ask the council to approve this decision. Thank you.
Councillor Andy Martin, you're seconding.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I am seconding it and reserve my right, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any debate on this item? I can't see anybody.
Councillor Phipps.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Councillor Phipps.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to make a point, really, regarding this item. Whilst I understand the civic offices need to be sold, I'm just a bit disappointed that all of the sale proceeds are to go to transformation. What about some investment in Christchurch? I am aware that Councillor Martin, Andy Martin, has twice pointed out at Cabinet that Bournemouth and Poole are getting £20 million of investment from levelling up money, but Christchurch is getting nothing. This is a Christchurch asset, and some of the sale money, I believe, should be used for investment in Christchurch. This is just my opinion, but the transformation programme has quite a deep hole, and it's so far not delivered what it should have delivered by now. So we have to keep putting money into it. I understand that, because we're told if we don't, there won't be any savings. But I don't see why all of this sale from the Christchurch asset should have to be used. People of Christchurch are a little bit fed up with being left out, and I just believe that some of these proceeds should come to Christchurch, and I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tarling, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to echo a lot of what Councillor Phipps has just said. Obviously, the building is within my ward, same as Councillor Cox, and I'm pleased that part of the motion is that we consult with the Town Council. I probably need to declare an interest that I am a Town Councillor as well. Could I just ask a question that due consideration will be given to the thoughts and wishes of the Town Council, and perhaps that, as Councillor Phipps has suggested, that some of that consideration might be that some of that consideration for the sale of the property actually goes back towards the benefit of Christchurch, although slightly contrary to what previous councillor has just said. I acknowledge that transformation, we are one BCP now, and unfortunately as a Christchurch resident and councillor, we've got to suck some of this up. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Tarling. George, I think your microphone might be on, or you're glowing. One or the other. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's the time of the season.
Right. Thank you. I'm glad you're not on fire over there. Did we have any more speakers? I'm so sorry. Oh, so sorry, Councillor Broadhead, I did see you, and then I forgot.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I'll be brief. I do agree with the last speakers, actually, on this item, and for that reason I will be voting against. Many of us have been quite involved in the transformation process. I actually think it's pretty critical that we keep the transformation process underway, because that is key to the long-term financial sustainability of this council. However, I had understood as part of that process that we had already got to the stage of the capital receipts that were already required. I know that there's a buffer that the finance team were looking to create to make sure that the flexible use of capital receipts could still be met. But I hadn't seen in previous iterations that the sale of this one in a short period of time was necessary to fulfil the use of flexible capital use receipts of the transformation programme. And the cabinet member may have a different view on that, so I'll be interested to hear his view. If it is the case that we actually do have some flexibility and do not need to sell this with some immediacy, then I'd remind members that actually, and particularly for those colleagues that are new, in normal times, apart from our transformation programme, you can only use capital receipts, so you can only sell stuff to buy other stuff, to reinvest in capital. And that means that we cannot use capital receipts to fund council services or to fill any revenue problems we have. And that's very deliberate. That's so that you don't sell stuff to fill any black holes that you may have or to provide services. But it does mean, I think, you need a plan for what you're going to do with the money. And if there is no need to sell this asset in a very short space of time, I think it is potentially a missed opportunity to sell it in the way that is brought about in this paper. There were plans, many of us, the reason we became councillors was because we want to make our place better. And we have very few levers of power on that. And one of the few levers that we do are the council-owned assets. And actually, if we sell this to the highest bidder, I think it's pretty inevitable that the people of Christchurch and on our area will just see simply more flats. It will be purely a residential-led scheme, whereas actually, if we gave it a little bit more thought, maybe even got planning permission ourselves. I'm not necessarily saying go back to the previous plans that we were looking at about true placemaking there, but if we do not need to sell this at pace, then absolutely, maybe we could get a little bit more interaction and public use out of this asset. But I will defer to the Cabinet member, because if he says we have to sell this quickly to fund transformation, I will stand corrected. Thank you.
Councillor Cox. Oh, sorry. Councillor Brown, then, in that case.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to speak briefly on this, partly in response to what I've just heard. It seemed to be we're being encouraged to actually sort of delay and dither on this decision, as opposed to getting on and making a decision, which is what we're doing, making a swift decision to actually save the council money. A lot of members here were at the meeting in February of this year where we actually opposed going forward with a full business case, which I believe was going to cost us £969,000 just to look at what potential options we had to use for this building. And a lot of members here are to be congratulated that we avoided that almost £1 million cost in doing that. And I understand it's costing us about £9,000 a month to maintain an empty building that actually doesn't deliver anything for residents. So I think it's good that the administration are making a swift decision to actually bring that to a close, put it on the market, gain a capital receipt and stop the costs that we've got for insurance and utilities and security and all of that. So I think it's good that we're getting on and making a decision, and I don't accept the comments made now that we should delay and discuss and consider and look at different options again. I think we just need to get on. We've made a decision. Let's get on and do it.
Any more debate? Councillor Martin, do you want to come back?
Thank you. Just wanted to thank Councillor Brown for picking up the key points that I was just going to make in response to Councillor Broadhead, and also wanted to thank Councillor Phipps for picking up the baton that I've been holding at the last two Cabinet meetings and the last full Council meeting with regard to the need for capital investment in Christchurch, across the whole of Christchurch. I'm not just talking about the Republic of Highcliffe, the whole of Christchurch. And I look forward to fairly soon, I hope, where we can see that happen when we have sorted out transformation. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Cox, do you want to sum up?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yes, I just wanted to say, I think we've waited long enough. It's 4.5 years since the elections in 2019 when that council chamber was redundant. And so we've already wasted nearly £500,000 of taxpayers' money servicing an empty building. And I think time's up. We need to sell it. And yes, we do need it for transformation, I'm afraid. So I would strongly recommend it. I hear Councillor Andy Martin and Councillor Phipps's suggestions about having it spent in Christchurch. Presumably I would prefer it to be spent in Christchurch Town Ward, you know, if we go along that line. But unfortunately that's not the way local government works. As many people know, if we sell a building, it's for the benefit of everybody within that council. And unfortunately, you know, when we come to sell the Poole Civic Centre or parts of it, then that will go to the benefit of the whole of BCP, not just Poole. And so on that basis, we unfortunately cannot use it for Christchurch, but I would very strong, you know, I stand right beside you both when it comes to wanting investment in Christchurch and developing Christchurch so that it's a good place, that continues to be a good place to live. Thank you.
Councillors, because I think we hear that at least one councillor is going to vote against this, we will go to a show of hands initially. So that will be in favour of the recommendation, which obviously you've all read, and I'm sure anybody that was interested in the public gallery has read it. So the recommendation is about the civic office. All those in favour of the recommendation? Yes, I should put my hand up as well. And me, Richard. Did you get me in there? Okay. Thank you. Hands down. Sorry, I feel like a school teacher here. Hands up, hands down. But you're all very good children. Thank you. Councillors against this recommendation? Right. Any abstentions? Councillor Trent? Oh, yes. Oh, so sorry. Yes, that recommendation is carried. Thank you, councillors. And we're moving on now to Cabinet minute. It's minute 49, so sorry, 25th of October 2023. Send programme of expansion regarding Broadstone First School. Again, if we have to go into exempt session, I shall obviously ask for a vote on that, but I'm assuming that we won't. So the recommendation is going to be presented by the leader, is that? Or, sorry, I haven't got that. Oh, so sorry, Richard. I'll do that properly now, Richard, for the recording. Councillor Burton, thank you.
That's perfect, and I believe the leader is going to second, rather than as a leader, but as a ward councillor, actually, in the area that it will be. So, many of you will be aware of the increased number of children and young people in BCP and across the country who are assessed to require special education provision. This is putting an increased financial strain on the high needs block. The huge and growing high needs block deficit is a real financial problem, and it's been highlighted to us in many meetings. Those who are involved in children's ONS or those who are interested in their business will also know about the government delivering better value intervention and the safety valve intervention that was discussed at scrutiny last night. One way to reduce the schools, the high needs block deficit is actually to educate more, send young people in mainstream settings and provide more specialist settings within BCP. This will reduce the number of pupils relying on expensive independent placement and also take pressure off the school's transport budget and also hopefully give them a better education. Within BCP, we do have the advantage of the majority of our schools being good and outstanding, so they're capable of being inclusive and delivering a good education to a wide range of pupils. This paper looks to provide 20 SEND places for children with autism spectrum condition, and it will provide constituency to feed into the 23 places already being provided by the nearby Broadstone Middle School, also in the same academy trust. Just want to point out that these aren't necessarily just for Broadstone children, these are for children right the way across BCP, so it's not just specific to the area. The 20 places actually, what you call is full-time equivalent places, if you want to look at it that way. More than 20 pupils could well use this facility because they might have access to dip in and dip out of it. Full consents of planning permission have already been granted. There is some 10% overspend contingency in the budget. I'd like to finish by saying that I'm very excited about the proposal and would encourage other schools to talk to us if they have interest in doing something similar. So I would recommend to the Council for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you, Councillor Burton. Now I believe Councillor Vicky Slade, or the leader, will second. Thank you.
Yes, I'm very happy to second it. There is an existing scheme in Broadstone Middle School, and in fact, the Broadstone Youth Club also facilitates a similar project with Winchelsea School for post-16 children. This is absolutely the type of facility that we should be promoting all over BCP, enabling children who couldn't otherwise access mainstream school to be able to be amongst a broad range of children and not have to be spending a long time, sometimes in taxis, going a long way off to specialist education, when actually what they probably need in a lot of cases is just a little bit of extra time and attention and a smaller unit to work from. So I absolutely support this and share Councillor Burton's desire that any other schools that are looking to do these schemes, please do come forward because we're actively looking for them.
Thank you. Members, does anybody else wish to speak to this motion? This recommendation, sorry. Right, I think we go to the vote on that one then, thank you. Have we got consensus on that? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Councillor Burton. Item 8. Appointment of independent co-opted members to Audit and Governance Committee. Right. Marcus Andrews, I understand you're going to move this recommendation, and then I believe Councillor Phipps is going to second. Is that right? Got that bit right on my papers.
That is
Thank
correct,
you, Councillor
Madam
Andrews.
Chairman. Councillor Phipps will be seconding it. Whilst there isn't actually a legal requirement to have independent members on council committees, it is best practice, and the current Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy's public statement or position statement endorsed by the government recommends that audit committees in local government should have at least 2 co-opted independent members. The previous Audit and Governance Committee and indeed council meetings have agreed that, in principle, decision to recruit 2 co-opted independent members, and following a recent ANG meeting, an advertising process took place, and indeed a recruitment panel was set up, and together with Councillors Herritt and Chapman Law, I chaired a selection panel, and we identified 2 suitable candidates. Samantha Acton, who is a local long-standing business owner of more than 20 years, and also Lindy Jansen van Vuren, who is a qualified chartered accountant with a background in local government. Audit and Governance Committee on the 26th of October endorsed the decision by the selection committee, and therefore I propose on their behalf to full council to approve the appointment of those 2 ladies as set out in the agenda under item 8. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Phipps, you wish to second.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. It is good practice to have independent members on audit and governance, I believe. I'm so pleased that the committee did agree to appoint these 2 very able people. I do hope you will support this, and I'm very happy to second. Thank you.
Councillors, any debate on this item? No, I think not. So do we have consensus to accept this? Thank you. That's approved then, thank you. Right. Item 9, appointment of councillor to Appeals Committee. Now, I believe, Councillor... I'm so sorry, Leader, I always expect you to do everything in a meeting, don't I? Councillor Slade, I believe you will move this recommendation and Councillor Earl will second. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is correct. So this paper has come to us because there is a vacancy on the Appeals Committee. You will be aware that we appoint to committees based upon political balance, and the Paul Engage party were expected to take up this seat along with the other 2 seats to which they're entitled under that balancing exercise. Unfortunately, they have advised that they are unable to fulfil this position, and therefore we cannot stick to the political balance, because otherwise they would have to take up another seat, which would require us to move everybody around, which it would not be appropriate. So we have 2 options: either to leave the seat vacant, which is putting a lot of pressure on the other members of the committee who are having to meet regularly to deal with school transport appeals, or to ask for a nomination to make up that vacant seat. The current make-up of the committee is 2 members of the Liberal Democrats, 1 member of the Conservatives, 1 Labour Party member, 1 Christchurch Independent, sorry, slip of the tongue, and 1 Paul People Party. Therefore, I asked the Green Party, as the largest group without a member, if they would be willing to take that additional seat, and Councillor Rigby has accepted very kindly to add that to his existing workload. So I would like to put that forward to the Chamber. I am aware that if there is a challenge over that, we have to go to a vote, but bearing in mind that we already have 2, and most of the other parties have 1, I hope people will support Councillor Rigby to join this committee. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Leader. Councillor Earl, are you seconding?
Yes, happy to second.
Members, any debate on this? Shall I get that far? Go on then. Is there a consensus, members? Thank you. Right, oh right. Okay. As you will see, the interim monitoring officer has left the room. Right. So we're now on to item 10. Gracious, that was quick. Item 10, appointment of interim monitoring officer. The Chief Executive took an urgent decision on the 28th of September 2023 to appoint Richard Jones, who is now not in the room, to appoint him as the interim monitoring officer for the period from 19th of October 2023, following the retirement of our former monitoring officer. So under Section 5 of the Local Government and Housing Act 1989, as amended, the Council has a duty to designate the role of monitoring officer to an officer of the authority. So the urgent decision taken by the Chief Executive in accordance with statutory requirements covered the period to 7th of November, which I believe is today, to allow the Council to formally designate the role. And there's a copy of the urgent decision on your agenda as an appendix. So, Chief Executive, do you wish to say anything to this?
Nothing to add other than the recommendation is to continue to appoint Richard until we make a permanent appointment. But I don't know if the Leader was going to say that.
Right, thank you, Leader.
Despite the fact that this is a Chief Executive's decision, which we now have to confirm, apparently yes. The protocol is that we still have to propose it and second it in the normal way. So I'm happy to propose that the appointment of Richard Jones as interim monitoring officer is confirmed as he has already been in post and doing a jolly good job for the last few weeks, especially with the additional work that was required to make sure that we had a safe and secure meeting this evening. So I would like to propose that, and Councillor Earl is agreed to second.
Thank you, Councillor Earl. Are you going?
I am indeed. Thank you. Very happy to second.
Councillors, is there any debate on that? Have we got consensus on that recommendation? Thank you. We'll just ask him to come back in now, shall we? Do we need to do that for a former councillor? No, I don't think so. Sorry. Are we having a break now? Right, okay. Right, so we've got to do these standards things. Right. That long pause was because Richard was discussing whether or not he should agree to be. No, I'm only joking. Only joking. He's agreed. Only joking. Right. Agenda item 11. Non-compliance with standards complaints process determination. The process for dealing with complaints under the Member Code of Conduct is set out in the BCP Council Constitution, to which we have all signed up. Standards Committee has delegated authority from the Council to implement this process. This report is to bring to Council's attention that 3 complaints have been received against 2 councillors of non-compliance with a decision made by the Chair of Standards in consultation under the process. And this report is only for information, it's not for debate. Item 13, of which we have done one question, I believe. Is that right? Item 12. Oh, sorry, where's item 12 then? Oh. Oh, right. So sorry. Oh, right. Sorry, sorry, George, are you standing up?
Thank you very much, Chair. I understand that the last item of business was not for debate, but is it not possible to ask some clarifying questions? Because I've had some clarifying questions from residents as regards the situation.
If you want to send that in writing to the Chief Executive, Councillor.
Rather than the monitoring officer.
Either or.
Either or.
That's very kind.
George.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Right. Now, going back in my papers, but forward in your papers. Right, we are going back now. And again, there's a long pause because I'm still turning over. So, Councillor Cooper, is it?
Yes, that's the motion. That's the second motion.
Right, okay. So, Councillor Cooper, we are now onto your motion. Oh, so sorry. I'm looking for you, Councillor Cooper, but there you are. Okay, you have 3 minutes, and you move the motion now. Thank you.
Okay, I'll move by fleet of foot on this one to amuse people. We said I use that word a lot, but yeah, this motion, voter ID, I'm just going to quote, I like to quote people because there's a young man who was expelled from school at 14. These giants of the political scene taught me a lot, and it's Tony Benn. And he asked 5 questions everywhere he went, and he wrote them on blackboards in schools, in universities, in community centres. Wherever he went to meet with people, he wrote these 5 questions, and they were, what power have you got? Where did you get it from? In whose interest do you use it? To whom are you accountable? But more importantly, how do we get rid of you? And when we've got a government at the moment in this country which is struggling to hold its integrity, it's losing the faith in the population. They voted this government in for, how God, it feels like a lifetime, where people are disillusioned, disenfranchised, and cost of living crisis and everything. The Conservative government are really, really worried. So what do? You put up barriers to democracy. Some of the things that I'm quoting are from the Electoral Reform Society. So, evidence from around the world shows that forcing voters to bring photographic ID to the polling stations just makes it harder for people to vote, while doing little to increase faith in the integrity of the system. The government think their scheme could cost this is shocking, under 180 million pounds over a decade. That's what it will cost the government. That's what the estimation is. And that's at a time when local authorities are more strapped for cash than ever, and central government has placed even more expensive things for you to do. You know, when people at the ballot box are stressed out already, this put another layer of tension and intervention. And I'll move into anecdotes now from the 5th of May. We witnessed, and I suspect anyone who stood did witness this, people in tears. One example at the Hamworthy Library, a young woman, a couple of kids, toddling along, and one in a pram, stressed out. She's got to get to school on time and then probably has to go to work or something. When she gets to the polling station, we say as interventionists, have you got your photo ID? No. Oh, well, okay, I'll come back later. I can guarantee you she probably didn't come back later. Over at Turley Moor at St Gabriel's, a chap came in who had quite clearly additional needs, really wanted to vote, and he had his NHS badge for identity. And he was treated quite rudely so by the staff they didn't have the right information about this. And eventually he was turned away, and he was really, really, really upset. Whether he'll ever vote again is debatable. So, a few quotes here from the newspapers.
Councillor Cooper,
yeah?
You are actually on your 3 minutes. Is there going to be much more?
I'll just use a quote, right?
Okay,
a sledgehammer to crack a nut, right? So in 2019, out of tens of thousands, millions of people that voted, there was one prosecution, and one of the intentions was to stop people impersonating other people to vote. It's not a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It's an industrial pile driver to crack a poppy seed. So I hope you can support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And your seconder is, I believe, Councillor Canavan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a very modest motion, and I would have liked to have asked the Council to do much more. You know, more engagement with the public, more public information, more work with university and college students, more literature in other languages. But the current constraints around resources have been fairly persuasive in keeping it as simple as it is. So voter ID was ostensibly introduced to prevent voting fraud, despite there being no evidence of fraud on any meaningful scale. So the result of the legislation has undoubtedly been to make it more difficult for people to exercise their democratic right to vote. The range of allowable ID was limited, and despite local authorities introducing their own ID arrangements, the take-up of that was fairly limited. And the turnout in BCP dropped by 3% between 2019 and 2023. The impact of this legislation also has, in my view, had a disproportionate impact on younger voters and those from black and minority ethnic backgrounds. And personal experience tells me that on election day, there were a number of voters turned away because they have no ID. And there is some data on that, and I have been grateful and record my thanks to the election team for having shared that information. However, it's much less quantifiable to number those people who simply didn't bother to vote because they knew they didn't have the identification to show. So I and many other candidates, Madam Chairman, have, at the last election, spent a good deal of time trying to encourage voters to sign up for postal votes. However, we now see additional requirements being introduced that are going to be applied to this as well, which makes this whole process more difficult. And as someone said in closing, Madam Chair, thank you, democracy is not a spectator sport. It's a participatory event. And it strikes me that we are making that participation more difficult. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would you like to turn your mic off, please? Thank you. Members, any debate on this motion? Councillor Trent, you were first.
Yeah, I would like to make one interesting point in this, because I think voter ID was it wasn't a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It was just basically some sort of blatant political interference. And I know that there are certain people who do not have suitable ID. When I was first elected as a councillor in 1983, I didn't have a passport or anything like that. I probably wouldn't have been able to have gone out to vote. You know, I didn't have the ID sort of thing. So, and you know, from a very sort of modest background and so on, and I think there are lots of people out there who will be excluded from this, and I know that there was a lot of effort made. I do disagree with the sort of proposer or the seconder on that. I think there was quite a lot of effort to make people aware of the need for voter ID, but there were still people that got caught out by it. It wasn't as severe a problem as I anticipated, but I do think it is wrong, and I think the government should just drop it now, or, and I think I heard someone the other day say, or we'll have to have a national ID card, which I think, you know, a lot of people are against.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Councillor... Oh, sorry?
Councillor Adams.
Well, it was Councillor Slade, was it? All right, well, we're right, we're having a bit of after you, no after you. Councillor Adams, come on then.
Oh, I'm pressing the wrong button. I'll get there eventually. Just a few points. I can kind of support some of the points that Councillor Canavan makes. I'm sure there's an argument to expand the acceptable range of IDs or increase the information about the voter authority certificates, which are free and easy to do. I helped at least a dozen people apply for these in the run up to the local elections. And as you can see from my microphone skills, I'm clearly not the sharpest tool in the shed. I question the timing. Whilst the Electoral Commission produced their interim analysis in May and further report in September, we're still awaiting a report from the government into this, and it's pretty obvious that those who are against the introduction of voter ID are still against the introduction of ID and are still using the same reasons that they were against it originally to be against it now. I mean, the Pickles report in 2016 clearly outlines a case for voter ID. It's a crime that without the... Oh, I should probably slow down. Sorry, it's my first time. Go easy on me. It's a crime that's impossible to prove, so it's impossible to know the scale of it. Identification of votes being backed by the Electoral Commission and the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe's Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, which state that its absence is a security risk. I mean, it's also allowed in the Czech Republic, France, Germany, Greece, Ireland, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Norway, Switzerland, even our Liberal friends in Canada. So I'm going to vote against the motion. I'm supportive of voter ID, and I think it should carry on.
Thank you, Councillor. Now is it the leader?
How do I follow that? Slowly. So, I'm going to be brief. I've spoken to Patrick about whether or not we could improve on this motion, but I realised that the ways that I would have improved on it would be to actually be seeking the council and councils all over the country to have additional burdens funding for the ridiculously high costs of not only the financial costs but the staffing and operational costs for running the voter ID. But I realised that would actually undermine the motion itself, because what Councillor Canavan is looking to do and Councillor Cooper is looking to do is to actually seek the removal of it altogether. So to amend it would be completely pointless. However, I do know that this motion is calling on us to raise these concerns. I am very happy to raise these concerns in any opportunities that I have, and I hope that others do as well. There is an irony, isn't there, that Matt Hancock was asked, how many people have been convicted, and I think it was 6, and he said that was 6 too many. I note that that's significantly fewer than the number of Conservative MPs who've been removed from the House of Commons for most disgusting behaviour. So, you know, we can't get rid of them for that, but we think that these few people who have committed this crime is the biggest thing ever. So I absolutely support this. I would encourage everybody to do what they can to help people to get these voter certificates, but it's absolutely outrageous that this piece of legislation disproportionately attacks those people who are young, who are disenfranchised in areas that are least likely to vote anyway, and it's an absolutely disgusting piece of legislation. We all need to call it out for what it is: voter suppression.
Any more speakers? Councillor Andrews.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. According to the Electoral Commission, the UK has low levels of proven electoral fraud. At the last general election, there were 164 cases of electoral fraud investigated by the police, all types investigated. However, there was only one conviction of a person who actually grabbed a ballot box to prevent others from voting, nothing to do with voter ID. That's out of a total electorate of 47 million votes. The Electoral Commission identified 14,000 people, definite people who didn't vote, who complained to them. And obviously, you know, spread across the country, that's not many. Another statistic is of the people who don't have any ID, be it Oyster card or, in fact, young people can't use an Oyster card, only pensioners can, passports and driver licenses and things like that. You can apply for a certificate to prove that you're a voter, but only 1% of those people did actually apply. Though, to some extent, you know, those 14, 20 odd thousand people who didn't vote, who could have voted, some may have voted in BCP, and some councillors elected to this council may have got a larger majority as a result.
I think Councillor Dower, you were next to indicate. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to remind one of the councillors in Kinston that there was actually only one vote between one of them that was elected and myself. So that is how important it is for people to be able to turn up to vote. On the doorstep on that day of election, there was actually a family I knocked on to go out to vote. None of them could vote because none of them had identification. They'd lived in the same council house for years and years and years. They'd never moved. They didn't have any identification. That was 4 people in just one household that couldn't vote. And this is the problem. It is disenfranchising people. It's stopping people from voting. And if these people had been able to vote, then chances are we'd have got a bigger majority than we did. Thank you.
Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to share a similar anecdote to my colleague here. I also knocked on a door on the day of the election for a woman who was a stay-at-home mum and her 18-year-old son, who would have been voting for the first time. Unfortunately, they didn't have the required photographic ID. My thanks to the electoral services team for having a hotline for emergency proxy votes and a variety of bits and pieces, and they did the best that they could. But obviously, there was a number of phone calls, and I think it's beholden upon the council to feed back as regards that particular hotline for anybody who's having difficulty in voting. The point which I wanted to raise was in answer to another councillor. A list of countries were listed as exemplars for having a similar sort of scheme for photographic ID. Many of those countries, just off the top of my head, actually already have photographic ID as part of their citizenship, so it's automatically offered. And I would remind councillors that this was one of the schemes for having photographic ID that was, I believe, Theresa May, when they came into power, actually reversed, so that only those people that are in the Republic of Ireland actually have photographic ID, whereas we don't. So this problem could have been resolved many, many years ago. But I will be supporting the motion because I am fundamentally against actually having to produce photographic ID, which, if you don't, for whatever reason, have it, denies you the right to vote for representation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Salmon.
So I like the motion and whatnot. It's a solid motion. I'd vote for it. But I think one of the things that hasn't come out in the debate is at the root of this problem, because this is a problem, this is a step that's been made simply to disenfranchise people, is for certain people, certain forces in our politics acting in bad faith have such a disproportionate outcome on how our politics looks, how it is run. So this was a policy that was unashamedly about voter suppression. And that was the reason it was brought in. That is it. That was the only reason this policy was brought in. And that was obvious from the get-go. And yet, there was nothing within our political institutions to stop this from happening. Our media did not properly report on this. And we have to recognise that this motion, I mean, much as we can do very little as a council, goes nowhere near addressing the root causes of this problem. We have a massive democratic deficit in this country. Even once we get rid of voter ID as a problem, we've still got the lack of PR. We've still got the fact there is no effective right of recall. And actually, we really need, I mean, we are in a desperate situation. And I like the motion, but we need to really look hard and closely at our democracy and how broken it is. This is a tiny symptom. This is like addressing a cracked nail on a patient who's multiple injuries. I mean, that's all I've got to say. It frustrates me that we cannot tackle the root causes of these problems and we're dancing around the edges. We've got to do more when it comes to addressing this democratic deficit. But yeah, I'll support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. Councillor Bagwell.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support this motion. I have lots of residents in my community that can't read and write, and my traveller friends also can't read and write. So, as such, photo ID and going online and trying to find hotline numbers actually wipe them out of voting. So, for me, I fully support this, Peter. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bagwell. I believe it's now Councillor Tarling.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For 4 years I was known as one vote, as in I lost by one vote at the start of this council. Pleased to say this time round I did much better, and I feel for those councillors that either lost by a very small margin or maybe even won by a very small margin. But on election day, yes, like many people here, we have experience of standing on polling stations, and I can say in Christchurch, I counted about 5 people that had to be turned away. One was a nurse, and I happened to be standing on a polling station, standing right next to a member of Parliament, who I won't name. And I then directed this nurse to this member of Parliament and said, perhaps you'd like to address this to the member of Parliament. And all respect to that member of Parliament, he gave a really good reason for voter ID. And then after this nurse had gone, and then actually came back about half an hour later, he turned around and said to me, he said, well, of course there's no voter fraud in BCP. So obviously he's got some insider information. He said, the reason our government has brought this in is because of other areas like Tower Hamlets. So I'd like to reassure the councillors here that we don't have voter fraud in BCP. So maybe we could claim for some sort of exemption that as a member of Parliament of the government actually said to me there is no voter fraud in the BCP region, that perhaps we could get a special exemption for BCP and voters in our council area. Thank you very much.
I take it that's not an amendment. Councillor Burton.
No, it wasn't, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, somebody with the word Democrat in their party name, I'm very fond of democracy. I think it's very important. Getting people out to vote is very important. Working with young people and children all my life, getting young people out to vote is very important to me. Generally, the older you are, the more likely you are to vote. Except, of course, young people suffer from the decisions a lot more than older people. getting them to vote first time to get into the habit. Sometimes they get it wrong, of course, and then we can persuade them to vote for the right party later.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, sorry.
Cheers, thank you, Chair. I just want to say that I'm very much supportive of this motion. I think it's an unnecessary barrier towards engaging in our democracy. When I was going around door knocking in May, a lot of my residents didn't have ID, didn't have valid forms of ID, and it was blocking them from voting. My own dad doesn't have an in-date form of identification. Fortunately, he had a driving licence that's about 15 years out of date, but it resembled him, so he was allowed to vote. But you know, I think if it wasn't for me standing, he probably wouldn't have bothered. You know, I think it's just an unnecessary thing that makes people apathetic. And one of the curiosities of it is the fact that at no point when I was wanting to stand as a councillor was I asked to produce ID. So it was actually, in fact, easier for me to stand as a councillor than it is for me to vote. And that seems wrong, to say the least.
Thank you. I think it's now Councillor Butt, who indicated.
Thank you. It's good to hear all the anecdotes, but of course I think we need to set those aside and look back to the basics. Obviously it does stem from Tower Hamlets, and I think Councillor Tarlin mentioned that. But we need to move forward on this. I think that the whole concept of this process was badly thought out, put through with rude haste and told nobody. Let's solve world peace, but we'll tell no one. If this is a concept which is thought to be a way forward, and I think there are very few people that think it is, it should have been done with full engagement of the whole country. So the whole country had time to assimilate this and had time to think as to whether this was feasible. Also, the ability for the voter ID was very narrow. It was your passport and a few bits and bobs. There were many other forms of voter ID that could have been used so that those disenfranchised people we hear about, the young, the elderly, those who can't read and write, would have had that opportunity to have taken part. Supported, we hope, by all the councillors, previously, of course, but all the councillors that would happen again in this room would be out there supporting their residents properly and have the time to do it, and it not be slightly engineered, I think, for elections which were pending. That's a personal opinion. But I certainly would support the motion on that verse. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Councillor Matthews, I think you were next.
Yeah, I'll be very quick, Chair. Totally support this motion. I think the way you empower people is to give them to the vote. So to remove it or put obstacles in the way is the antithesis of that. But I just actually want to quote Jacob Rees-Mogg. I have to say, I've never actually agreed much that he said, but he did. He was very critical of the voter ID scheme, and he actually described it as upsetting a system that had worked perfectly well up to that point, well documented in the media, but totally support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Howell, did you indicate?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm supportive of this motion as well. I think we're all aware of how difficult it is to engage people in local politics. And what particularly concerns me is that in a general election, typically you'll get an extra 20% people voting. A lot of those people will be more unaware of the need to register. And we all know that this legislation has been brought in deliberately to disadvantage young people because, you know, they're less likely to vote for the establishment. And I just wonder whether we can do more as a council and should be doing more as a council. I'm not familiar with how much we are already doing in terms of liaising with schools and doing other work to engage with young people and encourage them to register. But perhaps I could ask the relevant portfolio holder, I'm not sure which one that would be, but if we could make inquiries as to whether we are doing enough in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. I believe Councillor Broadhead, you indicated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I don't have particularly strong views about this, so I will be brief. I think on balance, and I fully respect the the differing views that we've heard tonight, and I do think that obviously it's an important subject, but equally, quite aside from some of the very fantastical things we've heard, that it's obviously about stopping young people voting, or it's clearly voter suppression, I think equally there have been examples around the country of voter fraud, and I think that's probably more to do with why this was brought forward by national government than some Machiavellian plan to stop people voting. Having said that, I do think the system can and should improve, and I think that's very much what national government should be focusing on, trying to make the best possible result. My point, however, is a little bit deeper, and it's an issue I have with both of the motions this evening, and it's about the fact that in our own constitution, it does say quite clearly that motions should be about things that the council can do that affect the council's operations or directly affect the council areas. And I just think we're stretching at the version of what we should be doing as local councillors. Frankly, I don't think many people elected me as a local councillor or many others to pretend to be national politicians. We have members of parliament to do that. And we're on track for spending much of the 2 hours already this evening arguing about things that are not within our levers of power whatsoever, and we've got really important stuff that we can and should be doing. So whilst I appreciate the sentiment, whilst I'm very respectful of all the views, I sincerely hope that in the future, if we are bringing forward motions, they can be about things that we can do as councillors, things that affect people on the ground, and things that people voted us to actually focus on, rather than showboating and try and pretend that we're some world leaders, which many of us would love to be, but we're clearly not. Thank you.
Councillor Brown, I believe you indicated. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a very brief point that hasn't been made. I fully agree with the motion. And what disappointed me about this voter ID was, okay, they wanted sort of passports presented or older person's bus passes. But driving licences, and it was the effect on young people that, for me, it just ingrained the expectation that as a young person, as soon as you can, you need to get a driving licence and think about driving as opposed to using trains or buses or bikes or e-scooters or whatever. And just the fact that that's taken as the standard form of ID, I didn't like the fact that it ingrains the expectation, the societal expectation that you need to get a driving licence as soon as you can.
Oh, Councillor Hadley, and then I think we can wind up. Thank you.
Just ever so briefly, just responding to Councillor Broadhead, I think I agree that we shouldn't be showboating, and I think that's really important. But this does affect us because there's a cost to the elections, and the cost to elections this time was significantly more because we had to provide more staff to administer the elections. So I think there is a relevance to this council in terms of the arrangements that were in place, in addition to the unfairness to certain groups within our electorate.
Thank you, councillors. Now, Councillor Cooper, do you want to sum up?
Swiftly, probably tired of my voice. Yeah, it's really good. The conversation that's arisen is fantastic. We're talking about inclusion rather than exclusion. I think everybody's got some really good ideas. I'd like to address Mark's point really quickly, if that's possible. There is a lot we can do with young people. There was a lot in place, and I sound like a broken record. Before everything broke up, we had the United Kingdom Youth Parliament working in every single school in the borough. I'm thinking of Poole, but it was the same in Bournemouth and in Christchurch. We had schools councils, which, if I was responsible for that in the borough of Poole, of working with every school from from the little ones up to the big ones, to set up schools councils and teach them about democracy and teach us for how we might engage them in making democracy a fun, exciting thing to do. All that's been broken apart, and what Mark wants us to do, and I agree with it 100%, we should set ourselves a task to rebuild some of the really important things with our children and young people, which are about democracy, inclusion, making the world a better place, and not being scared of what they're going to do. So let's rebuild it. Let's get every young person voting in the next election who's 18. Let's get every person who's disabled or can't get about voting in the next local election. Let's get every old person who's sitting isolated in a house somewhere, who hasn't got a passport, hasn't got a driving licence, who's poor and can't get out. Let's get them voting. So it does mean Mr. What's his name? Broadhead. Mr. Broadhead. I forgot your name. I'm sorry. it does mean a lot locally, and we're not grandstanding, because if I was, I think a solution to some of the things, especially what Joe was saying, is the overthrow of advanced capitalism, but that's not going to happen, is it? Oh, silence in the room. But thank you for supporting the motion, and thank you to Patrick for padding out some of the things that I left out, because I was a little bit wound up about doing it tonight, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Now, I think that we do have to take a vote on this, so I'm going to ask all those in favour of this motion to raise their hands high. Thank you. And I'm in favour as well, by the way. Oh, Julie. Thank you, councillors. Hands down. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? One abstention.
So that was carried.
That motion's carried. Thank you, Councillor Cooper. And then we've had that motion. Questions from councillors? Hang on, turning back to my original thing. We did have 4 questions, but we've taken one of them. Councillor Canavan, I understand you have a question to put to the leader on BCP future places. Councillor Canavan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could an update be given regarding the situation with future places, limited in particular? How many of the previous future places staff have now been transferred to BCP? Has the previous office that future places staff were working from now been vacated? Are all assets, including IT, equipment, financial information and intellectual property, now in the hands of BCP? What steps are being taken to assess the overall cost of engaging and winding up this company to the council taxpayer? And finally, future places appears to have operated with limited oversight or scrutiny. So what steps are being taken to review any lessons learnt and exactly who knew what and when regarding its operation? Thank you.
Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Canavan. So if I take each question in turn, in terms of the number of previous staff that have transferred, 13 of the 19 staff that were in future places 2 months ago have transferred. One of those, the Managing Director, is being consulted with regard to potential future employment, and another, the Chief Operating Officer, has resigned and is working his notice currently on gardening leave. Your second question about the offices. The offices were vacated early on the 31st of October and a new tenant is moving in, reducing the rent commitment considerably. In relation to the assets, we do believe that we have taken control of all of the IT equipment, information and intellectual property. In return for assessing the overall costs, we are currently assessing those costs, but this will not become clear until we have been able to value all of the work in progress and the consulting and strategic planning work that has been completed but not yet charged for. This is likely to take until December. And finally, in relation to governance, the internal governance is being reviewed to ensure that we have a robust structure for oversight of development, delivery and risk management is in place, which will include an independent advisory board, the terms of reference and membership of which is being finalised. We will keep councillors informed on the progress and final structures. And I would just like to add that it was a joy to meet with the staff when they transferred to us last week. They had a really positive induction day on their first day, and it's really great to see them wandering around the offices, actually looking as much part of BCP as all the rest of the staff, and I really do welcome them to the organisation.
Councillor Canavan, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm most grateful for the assurance regarding the review of oversight going forward, but my question also asked for a review of what had happened in the past. It's really important, in my view, to take some lessons learnt from this exercise, and I just would like to ask for some reassurance that that will be looked at also. That we do need to have a look at what went wrong. Thank you.
Leader.
Do you want to take your microphone? It's all right. I'm more than happy to come back on that. I think this is probably something that needs to be reviewed by Audit and Governance. That is the appropriate route for all of those matters of governance. So I'm hoping that Councillor Andrews will be happy to take that on so that we can have that done in public with the appropriate scrutiny. I'm more than happy to work with whatever officers are required to do that.
Councillor Rigby, I believe you've got a question to put to the Leader on the proposed review of council governance.
I do, thank you very much. Could the Leader please give an update on the progress with starting a governance review into the current Leader and Cabinet system, the opportunity to replace it with a committee system? There was a promise for this to commence within 6 months of the formation of the current administration, and I think we're about there.
Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. You are correct. During the initial negotiations to form an administration, one of the commitments we made to the Green Party group was to commit to a governance review within 6 months. Councillors will be aware that BCP Council was the subject of a DLUC governance review, Department of Local Levelling Up and Housing and Communities, when we came into office, and it was right to consider the issues in this report as a priority before we started any other internal governance reviews. The Audit and Governance Constitutional Working Group had their first meeting at the end of July, and I asked them to consider the potential of a governance review within their work. But they were clear this was beyond their remit and capacity, as they were prioritising the following 3 areas that will be delivered by the end of this civic year. Those 3 areas were the changes to the ONS structure, the introduction of 2 planning committees, one East, one West, and the restarting of the Transport Advisory Group, which are all on track to be delivered by the beginning of the next civic year. Officers in democratic services have confirmed that they are at capacity and would be unable to support other work programmes without additional financial input, and other councils have set aside up to £100,000 for the transfer of a cabinet to committee system. So we obviously have to be mindful of that cost. Members will be aware that we are having to close a budget gap of over £44 million, and so committing this level of funds before we have balanced the budget is simply not feasible. Every member of this administration has been shocked by the huge amount of time and effort required by the whole team, officers and members, to try to close this deficit. And I hope that those members who did attend the budget workshop on Friday now understand quite how difficult this is. However, the Chief Executive has spoken with other Chief Execs in councils that do have committee systems, including Sheffield, to gain their insight into the process, risks and cost. And I've spent some time in the London Borough of Richmond upon Thames, who have a committee system, to discuss their experiences. My LGA mentor is also the leader of a council with a committee system, and it's a regular discussion point at our meetings as we move it forward. The Three Towns Alliance remains committed to a full governance review, but is having to move more slowly on several of the key projects due to the budget pressures, including the implementation of the residence card, extension of 20-mile-an-hour zones and our climate plan. And so we hope members will be satisfied that making a number of smaller changes to the way we work, consult, engage and report in the meantime will demonstrate our commitment, even if it's going more slowly than we had hoped. I can confirm that the next step in moving to this governance review is an informal consultation with councillors on the governance and procedural issues that they would like to see changed, while we are considering the more substantive change through Cabinet. Members will shortly receive an invitation to a session in December to consider ways to improve this governance. Following that, a task and finish working group, chaired by myself, will be convened to consider the options and bring them back to members early in the new year so that we can take the process forward formally, hopefully just a few weeks outside of the original planned 6 months.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Rigby. Oh, no supplementary, Councillor Rigby. Goodness. Right, so we move on to Councillor Salmon. You have a question, I believe, for the portfolio holder for finance on cashless only council-run facilities.
Yeah, I'd just like to know if the council has any solid evidence that there's a cost or any other benefit to switching to the cashless provision of the car parks with little kiosks, selling ice cream, and if that outweighs the potential drawbacks such as inaccessibility and so on that come with moving to cashless provision.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the question. The answer is yes, we do. And the cost savings include cash collection costs, banking costs, administration costs, maintenance costs of the parking meters, and also the reduction in theft of cash from those when they're vandalised. I appreciate, there are significant costs involved in cost savings involved in moving to cashless. However, I do appreciate that there is a wider equalities impact, which is always considered when this happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Is there a supplementary, Councillor Salmon?
Only if I could see that evidence base, as I would love to see the cold, hard numbers that were behind that decision.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. Thank you, members. We're on to agenda item 14, urgent decisions taken by the Chief Executive in accordance with our Constitution. Chief Executive, have you any advice to give us?
Thank you, Chairman. I believe the only urgent decision I've taken in the meantime has been the appointment of the interim monitoring officer, which you have subsequently confirmed for the period beyond that. Chair, I just wonder if, while I have the microphone on, could I just let members know there have been a few interruptions on the live stream, and I think members have lost the access to the internet occasionally during this evening. We will upload the full recording as soon as we can, but I know one or two people outside had problems from about 8:15 or so. We don't quite know what the cause is. We'll see if we can resolve it for next time. Sorry, Chairman, we also appointed the Corporate Director for Wellbeing, Gillian Kay, who is behind us on the rostrum, so hopefully most councillors have met her. Yeah. Do apologise, Gillian. You were also an urgent decision. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Chief Executive. We've got to the end of the agenda in good order, and at 9 o'clock, which is very, very good for this council, I must say. Members, before you do disappear, can I just say that I'm really, really pleased with how this evening went, because there were problems envisaged. I think we all rose above it very well, and I think the demonstration went very well as well. And I know the people in the gallery have gone, but thank you anyway for coming. So thank you. Thank you, members. Well done.
Close the meeting.
Yeah.